The basket sat on the last table under flickering Christmas lights, wrapped in red cellophane that had started to crinkle at the corners, as if even hope itself was growing tired of waiting. People walked past it all evening, laughing, bidding on expensive gift sets and shiny decorations, but no one stopped long enough to look at the handwritten tag hanging from that basket. Inside it were simple things: homemade cookies, a knitted scarf, a jar of jam, and a few small toys, things made by hands that had been working long after midnight. The woman who made it stood near the wall, pretending to smile, but every minute felt heavier than the last. Before we continue, if you believe that kindness still matters and that second chances can change lives, please take a moment to like this video, comment where you're watching from, share it with someone who needs hope today, and subscribe to the channel Lonely Dad Strong Heart. Stories like this remind us that small moments can change everything. The small Christmas charity auction had been organized by the local community center in a quiet neighborhood where winter evenings arrived early and the streets smelled faintly of wood smoke and bakeries. It was meant to raise money for struggling families before the holidays. Tables were arranged in rows, each filled with baskets donated by businesses or well-off families, luxury chocolates, spa kits, electronics, and expensive holiday decorations. People gathered around those tables quickly, their bids climbing higher and higher as cheerful music played in the background. But the last table, the one closest to the exit door where cold air slipped in every time someone left, held the basket that almost no one noticed. The woman who had placed it there was named Maria. She had arrived early that evening, her hands slightly trembling from both the cold and the quiet nervousness she carried everywhere these days. Maria was a single mother raising her 7-year-old daughter, Lily, in a small apartment that always felt a little too quiet at night. A year earlier, life had taken a turn she never expected when the person she once relied on disappeared from their lives, leaving behind unpaid bills, broken promises, and a silence that felt louder than arguments ever had. Maria worked 2 jobs, cleaning offices during the day and baking late at night, trying to keep everything together while protecting Lily from the weight of the truth. The basket she brought to the auction wasn't filled with expensive things because Maria simply didn't have the money for that. Instead, it held pieces of her time, her effort, and her love. The cookies had been baked while Lily slept on the couch wrapped in a blanket. The scarf had been knitted slowly during bus rides and short breaks at work. The jar of jam came from berries she had frozen months ago, saving them for something special she hoped would make someone smile. To Maria, it was more than a basket. It was a quiet wish that someone might see its value, that maybe, just maybe, people would understand that sometimes the most meaningful gifts are the ones made with struggle behind them. As the evening went on, the crowd grew louder. Bidding numbers were called out, laughter echoed across the hall, and people congratulated each other on winning the most popular baskets. Maria stood there watching, clapping politely for others, even as her eyes occasionally drifted back to the table where her basket remained untouched. Every passing minute made her chest tighten a little more. She told herself she didn't care about the money, but deep down she had hoped that if someone bought it, it might help her pay for Lily's winter boots or a small Christmas dinner. Across the room, there was a man standing quietly near the coffee table, watching everything from a distance. His name was Daniel. Most people in the room didn't know much about him except that he had moved into the neighborhood recently. Daniel was a single father raising his young son, Noah, after life had taken a painful turn that he was still learning to live with. Months earlier, he had lost his partner to a sudden illness that left their home filled with memories and silence that no amount of time seemed to soften. Since then, Daniel had learned how to braid messy hair, pack school lunches, and comfort a child who sometimes woke up crying at night. Daniel wasn't someone who talked much at gatherings like this. He had come mostly because the community center had helped him during a difficult time, and he wanted to support the event in whatever small way he could. But as he walked past the tables, he noticed something others hadn't really stopped to notice: the basket at the end, and the woman standing nearby who tried to look like she didn't mind being overlooked. There was something about the way Maria kept adjusting the ribbon on the basket that caught his attention. It reminded him of the way people try to hide disappointment without letting it show too clearly. Daniel knew that feeling well. Time kept moving. The auctioneer's voice grew louder as the final bids approached. People began gathering their items and coats, satisfied with their purchases. Maria felt the quiet embarrassment building inside her. She started telling herself she would just quietly take the basket home. Maybe Lily would enjoy the cookies and the toys inside it. Maybe it didn't matter after all. But then, just as the auctioneer prepared to close the event, Daniel walked over to the last table. He looked down at the basket for a moment, noticing the careful details, the uneven stitches in the scarf, the slightly crooked label on the jam jar, and the way the cookies were arranged with care. He could almost imagine the late nights and tired hands that had prepared it. When the auctioneer asked if anyone wanted to place a starting bid, the room had already begun to thin out. A few people glanced over briefly, then looked away. That was when Daniel lifted his hand quietly and offered a bid of $5. It wasn't a big amount, and for a moment the room barely reacted. Some people smiled politely, assuming the basket wasn't worth much anyway. But something unexpected happened in that moment that no one in the room could have predicted. Maria looked up, surprised. The weight she had been carrying all evening shifted slightly, replaced by a small flicker of relief she hadn't allowed herself to feel before. It wasn't about the money anymore. It was about someone finally seeing the effort behind the basket. The auctioneer called out the bid, asking if anyone wanted to go higher. For a brief moment, silence filled the hall. But Daniel didn't step back from the table. Instead, he looked around the room and then gently lifted the basket, almost as if it deserved respect. And that simple act changed the mood in the room. People began to notice the basket more closely now. Someone whispered that it looked handmade. Another person mentioned the scarf looked warm and unique. A woman who had already won 2 expensive baskets paused and looked again at the jam jar, realizing how carefully it had been made. What had once been ignored slowly became something people felt curious about. Another small bid followed. Then another. Maria's heart began to race, not because she expected anything dramatic, but because something about the moment felt different now. Daniel stood quietly, not trying to compete aggressively, but staying present, as if he had already decided that the basket mattered regardless of the outcome. But the miracle that followed wasn't just about the rising bids. As people gathered closer, someone asked Maria about the items in the basket. She explained softly that she had made them herself. She didn't say much about her struggles, but the truth was visible in the tired strength in her eyes. That was when Daniel shared something simple but honest, that sometimes the things made with love mean more than the expensive ones on the other tables. The room grew quieter after that. Bidding continued, but now the energy had changed. It wasn't about competition anymore. It was about recognizing something real that had been overlooked. By the time the auction closed, the basket that started with a $5 bid had reached an amount Maria could hardly believe. It wasn't just enough for boots or groceries. It was enough to make her feel like the long nights and quiet sacrifices had finally been seen by someone. But the true miracle didn't end there. Over the following days, something else began to unfold. People from the community center reached out to Maria after hearing about her story. One person offered help finding better work opportunities. Another family invited Maria and Lily to spend Christmas dinner together so they wouldn't feel alone. Slowly, the invisible walls that had surrounded her life began to open. And Daniel, who had simply raised his hand with $5 that night, found himself forming an unexpected friendship with Maria and Lily. Their children became friends first, laughing together in the park while snow covered the ground. The quiet loneliness that both adults had carried started to ease, replaced by conversations that felt honest and warm. Sometimes miracles don't arrive with bright lights or dramatic moments. Sometimes they begin with someone noticing what everyone else ignored. Before we reach the ending, I want to ask something special from you. In the comments, write the word kindness if you believe small acts can change someone's life more than we realize. Because by the time Christmas morning arrived, something beautiful had happened. Maria woke up not with the heavy worry she had carried for months, but with a sense that maybe the future didn't have to be so frightening. Lily ran into the living room, excited about the day, while snow fell gently outside the window. And across town, Daniel watched his son smile in a way he hadn't seen in a long time. Two families who had been walking through life alone had found something unexpected that winter: hope, connection, and the reminder that even the smallest gesture can start a chain of change that reaches farther than anyone imagines. And all of it began with a basket everyone ignored, and a single dad who believed it was worth at least $5. If this story touched your heart even a little, please take a moment to like the video, leave a comment, and share it with someone who might need a reminder that kindness still exists in the world. Your support helps stories like this reach more people who need hope today.